Hope I'm audible. Thank you for joining us today. Hope you all had a lovely lunch. I think it's safe to say that in today's world, people love to rule and claim thrones in the gaming world. It gives them the power, the right, and more importantly, the adrenaline rush to keep pursuing missions until they win them all. With more than 2.5 billion gamers spread across the world, it seems like this industry has no headwind. But there has been many issues regarding the gaming industry surfacing lately. Today we have Athreya Ramkumar, research analyst, taking us on a tour through the elements of the gaming industry. Athreya, you can kindly take over the podium.
Yeah, thank you, Tarun. Good afternoon, everybody. And once again, thank you for joining us on a Saturday afternoon. So in our webinar so far, we were talking about our products and markets generally. So we thought we'll switch it up and speak about specific industries. And this is just the first webinar in that series. So why did we choose to talk about gaming? There obviously has been a lot of news flow and attention due to the big M&A by Microsoft. And gaming is a super platform. It has something for everyone. Casual gamers like to play games like Wordle, Candy Crush, Ludo, Crossword, etc. Whereas social gamers who like the social aspect play multiplayer games, and hardcore gamers prefer single player games with great interactive stories. So before looking at how the industry is positioned now, let us take a walk back in time and look at how the industry has evolved. So this was the front page headline of an article in the New York Times in early 1982. So clearly, it says Atari, which is a pioneer in the gaming industry, swells Warner Communications profits. So Warner was their owner. So clearly, the company was doing well. Subsequently, in late 1983. This was again the front page, news article titled "Video Games Industry Comes Down to Earth." The boom is over for the video game industry, claimed the New York Times. So within a short period of 1.5 years, there has been such a drastic shift in tone. So what exactly happened in the 1980s? Let's take a look at that. So in the 1980s, or from the mid 1970s, it was the gaming industry had just the concept of gaming had just started picking up mid 1970s onwards, whether it is arcade gaming or video gaming. So from 0% of GDP in the mid 1970s, by 1982 the home console market alongside the arcade gaming market, went from 0% to close to 2% of GDP in a span of 5 to 7 years. So obviously that was a massive rise, and that has been depicted in the chart you see on the right. Atari, we spoke about Atari being a gaming pioneer. So they were bought by Warner actually only in 1975 for a paltry sum of $28 million. And subsequently in 1977, Atari launched their video console system. And at this point in time, they had sales of a mere $75 million. And this jumped by 40x in a span of 3 years and exceeded $3 billion. So clearly, there was a massive jump in the gaming industry as a whole, whether it was arcade gaming or home console gaming. However, as home console gaming or console gaming started picking up, arcade gaming started falling, and this is obviously because of multiple reasons, and they withered away into obscurity. So the main reasons were arcades were generally expensive machines, big in size, and they could only play a specific game. On the other hand, home consoles could be used obviously at home. They were much smaller and they could play a wide variety of games. And if you as the boom was happening from the mid 1970s, it peaked out in 1982, and this was And in December of 1982, Atari revised its Q4 guidance from an expected growth of 50% to actually a contraction of 10 to 15%. So the delta change was close to 60 to 65%. So that was the impact of the volatility and impact of the downturn in the industry. So why did this happen? There were multiple reasons for this boom and bust. So the reasons for the bust were the main reason was that since the industry was booming, uh, there were a lot of entrants to the industry. So there were more than nine console manufacturers at the time, and a lot of toy companies also wanted to get in to the act. So they there were a lot of price wars as well, which led to the profit pools being depleted. Second, these companies were very greedy, and they wanted to make a lot of money, and they wanted to make the most of the rise. So they launched multiple games as fast as they can without really worrying about quality. So it's also important to note that in the 1980s, the feedback loop was very long and or delayed, as there was no internet or mobile phones at that time. So word of mouth took a lot of time to travel. Also, you had to buy games physically in retail stores. So these companies also used to indulge in channel stuffing. So a lot of inventory was dumped in retail outlets to take market share and to grow the top line. What happened subsequently was that when there was no sell through from the customer end, and a lot of customers actually returned games after finding out that the games were very poor in quality. A lot of inventory was actually returned by the retail shops to the companies themselves, and the companies were not able to pay back the retailers. So the retailers also suffered massive losses, and they were left scarred. To just an example of this, at the peak of the boom, Atari actually paid $25 million for exclusive rights for the movie Extraterrestrial by Steven Spielberg. And they had produced 6 million copies of this game. Prior to this, the most popular game, Pac Man, had only sold 5 million copies totally in its lifetime. So, obviously, and the funny aspect of this is that they only had 6 weeks to develop the game. So it was a botched job, and the quality of the game was horribly bad, and it's till date known as the worst game made ever. Uh, another reason for the crash of 1983 was that home computers, or the personal computers as it's known now, had just launched back then. And if you and the US economy was also doing pretty badly in the 1980s. So the inflation was in double digits. Paul Walker was the Fed chair who had increased interest rates to close to double digits. And in 1982, the US GDP actually contracted by close to 2%. So customers were very angry with the video game industry for taking them for a ride, and they also found that the personal computer could be used for other things as well, and had many other use cases, and could also be used for gaming. So a lot of demand shifted from game consoles to personal computers. So what was the financial impact by the end of 1983? The industry had collapsed by 97%. So it fell from a peak value of $6 billion in revenue back to $100 million. So that was the impact of this drastic crash in 1983. Also, Atari lost over $500 million that year, and multiple companies in subsequent years actually went bankrupt and have shut down since then. And Atari lost its relevancy after that. So an interesting event to showcase the madness of the extraterrestrial deal and the madness of the industry was this. Since there were a lot of copies being manufactured by by the video game developers, and they were not able to sell it through in 1982, 1983. So they had to store a lot of video game cartridges, and they didn't have space for that, and obviously it was expensive. So since they were not unable to sell it, they actually dumped it in a landfill in New Mexico. And this picture is actually taken in 2014 when, for a documentary made on Atari, they actually excavated these video game cartridges. Close to 1 million copies of games were dumped in these landfills. That was the extent of the hubris, at that point in time. So, if the industry crashed by 97%, but we also saw in the chart that it bounced back and retained its previous peak by 1990. So, how did it recover so sharply, and who gained in the bounce back? So this leads us to the rise of Nintendo and leading Japanese gaming companies. So the Japanese economy was booming in the 1980s, unlike the US. So and it led to the Japanese economy being a bubble close to the end of the 1980s, and then subsequently it has fallen off. It has not grown as much. But in the 1980s, they were doing really well. Nintendo launched its Famicom or Family Computer as it's known in 1983, and it was a massive hit in Japan. So they spotted an export opportunity in the US, as many gaming companies were either reducing their workforce, or they were shrinking, or they had applied for bankruptcy. However, they had an interesting situation in hand. There was a lot of pushback from retailers to stock video games and video game consoles because of the losses they had faced in the past few years. So Nintendo actually had to rebrand the video game console, and they had to call it an entertainment system. And they actually changed the design as well to make it look like an entertainment system and not a video game console. And they changed the name to NES, or the Nintendo Entertainment System, and it was launched in the US in 1985. So how did they gain? Obviously, customer approval is very key, and many people were disheartened and distraught by what the gaming companies did in the early 1980s. So what they did was that Nintendo ensured that the quality of the games were very good by creating a seal of approval, Nintendo seal of approval. So they limited the number of games per developer to 5 per year. They also developed a control chip to ensure that the standard was maintained, and for authentication. So this is actually pretty important in the history of games, because this was the genesis of game licensing and game authentication. And this was pretty pivotal for the industry, because it subsequently was used by many people, all companies in the future. So by 1990, the market had recovered and reached its previous peak, but with now Nintendo and other Japanese gaming companies having a dominant share. And so these events actually shaped the industry and changed it for the better, making it stronger for the long term. So now that we've looked at how the industry has evolved, let's look at the current industry structure. So this is broadly the structure of the industry. There are game developers, game publishers, and platforms. So game developers are people who make the game. Game publishers are people who take the game to the public, and platforms are how people access the game. So game developers can be either big companies or small companies. Smaller companies will not have the time to fund or market or publicize and take game to consumers globally, whereas publishers fill in that role. So most big video gaming companies like EA, Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo are both game developers and publishers. However, and in some cases, obviously, they are the platforms as well when it comes to Xbox and PlayStation and Nintendo. However, there are multiple smaller gaming companies who just develop the games, and these games are published by other game publishers. So Super Gaming, which is mentioned as a game publisher, as a game developer, is an Indian gaming startup who, they just raised their Series A round. So there are multiple small companies like that across the world. So this is the size of the gaming and the movie industry. So the chart on the left is the size of the gaming industry. We can see that the gaming industry is close to $220 billion, whereas the movie industry at its peak was close to $40 billion. So the gaming industry is more than 5x bigger than the movie industry. But movies, generally get more traction in the media. If you look at the segmental mix, mobile gaming constitutes around half of the gaming industry, and it's the fastest growing. This is because it attracts casual players, and people use it. People like to play games on their commute to work or anywhere else. An interesting aspect to note for the global box office is that uh, in 2019, the total global box office was close to $42 billion, and it's expected to reach that peak only in 2025. However, the gaming industry was actually bolstered by COVID and benefited from the pandemic, unlike the global box office and or the movie industry. So the entertainment business is a business of eyeballs, or it's a game of eyeballs. So gaming popularity has been increasing over the past many decades, and this is the number of minutes spent per day on average in 2015. So gaming was close to 80 in 2015 across from between 8 and 17-year-olds. Whereas if you look at into the data in 2019, this has gone up to above 90 as well. So the gap between the amount of time spent between TV and movies and gaming has narrowed down, and it's at par now. So the data is available only till 2019 because of the survey by BCG. However, post COVID, this was obvious. Gaming, would have benefited and will be much higher than the amount of the minutes spent on TV and movies. So while the gaming industry represents $200 billion in direct spend, it influences another $100 billion in adjacent markets. So whether it is gaming accessories, gaming hardware, esports, etc. So if you look at the total influence of the gaming market, it influences close to $300 billion. So now that we have looked at the market size, what is the revenue model for games generally? So on the right, you can see that for mobile gaming, it's mostly monetized via advertising and in-game transactions. Whereas for other games, 2/3 of the revenue, for other mediums, 2/3 of the revenue comes from the sale of a game, and the remaining 1/3 of the revenue comes from either in-game transactions or subscriptions. Some interesting data points to note is that 50% of the in-game purchases are actually made by 0.2% of the buyers. So there are a certain select few, whales, so to speak, in the industry who play games and who spend a lot while gaming. Also, the recent trend of direct digital sales of games as opposed to physical disc sales is beneficial for gaming companies as the margins are 20% higher. So now let's look at the demographics of people who play games. Generally, if you talk to at least people in India, there's a wide misconception that games are played, only by men, whereas the data clearly suggests that it's pretty diverse and it's not as male dominated. There are games of all genres, and there is something for everyone. Some more data points on demographics. So 39% of women are experienced. So 39% of all gamers are women, and basically, and 60% of new gamers identify as females. So broadly, the mix is changing towards women, and the number of women gamers who are entering is actually more than the number of men who are entering, who are starting to play video games. Another misconception is that most of people who play games are very young. So actually, just 1/3 of the gamers are less than 25 years old, whereas the median age is close to 32. So that is another misconception. And close to 32% of all gamers have actually played games regularly for more than 5 years. So there's a lot of repeatability in the user base. Now let's look at the overall, the biggest markets in the world. So obviously, the United States and China are the top two markets. However, if you notice, the third biggest market is Japan. So the Japanese economy is close to the US economy is like 6.5 times bigger than the Japanese economy. But if you look at the gaming revenues, Japan's gaming market is close to 50% of the US. We had looked at how the gaming industry had evolved, and that is exactly the reason why Japan's gaming revenues are so high, because their economic growth coincided with the growth of video games, as we saw previously. Another thing to note is that India has 20 crore gamers, which is similar to the United States, but it's only a 1.5 billion market, which is close to 3% of the total revenue. So clearly, there should be a lot of runway ahead in terms of the revenue pool being expanded. And China is another big gaming market. Tencent is the biggest gaming company by revenue globally. They do a lot of M&As, they make a lot of acquisitions, and to have access to the Chinese market, most people need to go with Tencent. So when Nintendo had to launch the Switch in China, they had to license it out to Tencent. So let's look at one interesting global country which is focusing on this sector. So we have looked at what Saudi Arabia is doing to the world of football and to the world of golf. They're trying to do the same thing to gaming and esports. They're deploying a lot of money to build an ecosystem. You can see that they have a mandate to deploy close to $38 billion to become a video game hub, and they own the biggest esports players in the market. And recently they also conducted an esports tournament with a prize pool of $45 million totally. So that's the amount of that's the thrust they're giving to to develop the gaming ecosystem in the country and to diversify away from oil. Just some data points on Saudi. They make up Saudi Arabia alone is 45% of the Middle East and North Africa gaming market, and the total market size of the gaming market size in Saudi Arabia is $2 billion, which is roughly equivalent or slightly higher than India. And 50% of the apps downloaded in Saudi Arabia are gaming apps. This is as compared to 40%, which is the global average, and this is the highest in the world. So games are actually very popular in Saudi Arabia. So there has also been a massive consolidation which has happened in the sector over the past decade. 2022 was the biggest year for gaming. There were over 1,300 deals which were closed, and the deal value was close to $130 billion. Obviously, this is broad mainly because of the big Microsoft acquisition of Activision, close to $70 billion. However, there are also a few other big deals which happened last year. Zynga Games, which is a mobile gaming developer, was acquired by Take-Two, who owns the GTA franchise. EA Games made a few acquisitions last year, Codemasters, Glue Mobile, and Sony also made an acquisition last year. We can see that from this picture that the Saudi Public Investment Fund and Tencent have made multiple acquisitions over the past few years, and they've made investments in public entities as well, like Nintendo, Activision, and so on. So there has been a lot of focus on this industry. So diving deeper into subsegments, we saw that mobiles are growing faster and are 50% of the market. But it doesn't mean that PC gaming and consoles are dying. Hardcore gamers actually prefer PC and console gaming for a more immersive and complex experience. So from the chart, you can see that console gaming is growing faster than PC gaming, and it's like 25% higher than PC gaming. So there are broadly three consoles: the PlayStation, the Xbox, and the Nintendo Switch. So the Nintendo Switch is not really comparable with the PlayStation and the Xbox since it's a hybrid console. and it's a portable console as well. So it's preferred by and the games on the Nintendo Switch are preferred by casual gamers, families, as well as kids. Whereas for the PlayStation and Xbox, core gamers are their target audience. It's pretty clear that in the past two generations, so in the bottom part of the chart, you can see the lifetime PS4 and Xbox sales. PS won the previous generation, so they've sold more than 2.5 times of the Xbox. Whereas and the PS5 and the Xbox and the latest Xbox One X and the One S was launched in 2020. And if you look at their lifetime sales as well, you can see that PlayStation sales are actually almost double the Xbox sales. So PlayStation is clearly the big winner here. And the Nintendo Switch is launched in 2017, and it's close to its end of its life. So it's expected that they're going to upgrade the Switch soon. And you can see that they've sold 125 million units. So just to give you context, the Wii U, which was Nintendo's previous generation, its previous console, sold 13.5 million units in its lifetime. So this is broadly almost 10x the sales of the previous generation. Speaking of that, we saw that there are different consoles and different generations seem to sell differently. And this was actually the biggest worry for all investors and all participants, including the companies. The cyclicality of the industry was the biggest worry. So if you look at this chart on the top, in 19 in the play as the PlayStation, the original PlayStation launched in 94. It launched in 94, and subsequently the PS2 launched in 2000. And if you notice, when the subsequent console launches, the company has always made a loss, whether it's in 2000 or in 2006 when the PS3 launched, or in 2013 when the PS4 launched. However, something interesting happened over the past decade. If you look at 2020, 2021, this is when the PS4 was in its end cycle and the PS5 had launched. And the company and the PlayStation division had actually made its all-time high operating income. So this is broadly because they had transitioned to a subscription-based model. So this ensured that the revenue became more predictable. There was a lot of recurring revenue, and there was improved user engagement as as people continue to play more if they pay for it in a subscription model, and obviously there was higher loyalty as well. So we have looked at the console growth, looking at the PC market as well. So the number of PC gamers, even though it's been growing at the overall PC market has been growing at at maybe 1 or 2% a year. It has been steadily increasing over the past decade. So this is Steam's lifetime user count. So Steam is basically a marketplace, marketplace leader in the PC industry, and you can see that the number of users has been steadily increasing over the past decade. And post-COVID, there has been a big jump since then. And these are the prize pools of competitive tournaments, or esports as it's popularly known. These tournaments happen mostly on computers. However, there are also tournaments which happen for consoles, but it's predominantly computers. So esports is also a big industry. It's close to $2 billion globally, and you can see the growth in the prize pools over the years. So it's been steadily growing, and there's a lot of interest, and there's a lot of interest in esports and watching players play competitively. So now that we've spoken about how big the gaming industry is and how big certain subsegments are, we've spoken about how the gaming industry is 5x bigger than the movie industry. So there are a lot of synergies between video games and movies. This is because video games are nothing but interactive storytelling, and there's a dearth of original IP and stories in the world. So franchises are built on IP, right? We have seen what Disney has done over the past 2 decades. Comic book movies dominated the box office in the past 2 decades. So movies, it's expected that in the coming decade, because there's a lack of IP, there'll be a lot of synergies between the gaming industry and the movie industry. So every media company needs a holistic strategy so that they can utilize their IP across all mediums to reach more people. So movie IP can be used for games, and vice versa. Gaming IP can be used for movies. So let's now see how different companies are tackling this problem. So this is Netflix. So Netflix had famously claimed in 2019 that Fortnite is a bigger competitor than HBO. Fortnite is a game, and subsequently in 2021 they launched Netflix Games, which on mobile, and they have acquired 6 studios so far. Also, there was a news like a day or two ago that they are launching Netflix games on TV, and you can use your mobile phones as a controller. So they're very focused on, they're very focused on the gaming market. They have even launched a few mobile games using Stranger Things, which was their TV IP on Netflix. So this was a quote from Reed Hastings in an interview he gave. So he clearly says that video games, which is small for us today, but hopefully in a decade it will be very big and an important part of our business. If you look at Nintendo, it's the same story. Recently, Nintendo in 2017 partnered with Illumination Studios to make movies based on their gaming IP. So their first movie launched this year, which is called Super Mario Bros. And you might have seen it. So it grossed over $1.35 billion globally. So it was a massive mega blockbuster. And they are also focused on expanding their IP and making more movies out of their gaming IP. Interestingly, they've also expanded into theme parks. So the strategy is actually very diverse. This is Sony, which is obviously they're also big in media. And The Last of Us, which was a HBO show, was the second biggest hit for HBO since 2010. So The Last of Us is actually a gaming franchise which is exclusively owned by PlayStation, that is owned by Sony. And another exclusive gaming IP which transitioned to being a high-grossing movie was Uncharted. It grossed over $400 million. And there's going to be another release next week based on their gaming IP, Gran Turismo. It's gonna, which is a movie which is gonna, release next week. So every company is very focused on this. And so this is an interesting chart from their investor deck. You can see that over the past decade, the percentage of gaming as an overall mix has increased when you look at just their entertainment businesses. So it's a very important part for them. And finally, we look at Warner Brothers. They had launched a game based on Harry Potter, which is called Hogwarts Legacy, and the overall gross sales were over $1 billion. And this was the CEO's comments in the latest earnings call. So broadly, they're saying that gaming is they see a lot of great potential in gaming, and they're positioning their gaming business to be more strategic, and they're investing accordingly. So all companies, all media houses are having a holistic strategy to utilize their IP in all outlets. So now that we have looked at the past and the present, let's probably focus on the Indian market. So the Indian market overall is close to a $3 billion gaming market, and it's expected to grow 3x to a $10 billion market by 2030. However, an interesting point to note here is that 50% of the Indian market is contributed by real money gaming, as in rummy, poker, etc., or dream fantasy sports like Dream 11, etc. So when you look at the Indian market's demographics, it's vastly different when you compare it to the global average. So 70% of India's gamers are actually male, which is different from what we previously saw. And most of the gamers are in tier one markets. So there's a huge potential and a huge runway for the Indian gaming sector. Another interesting data point is that 95%, close to 95% of gamers in India are mobile gamers. So clearly, this is because it is mobile. I mean, it's more accessible to everyone, right? So there is a huge potential going forward. So as the per capita GDP increases, console gaming and other forms of gaming should also increase. So if you look at startup funding as well, the cumulative funding in gaming startups since 2015 is over $3 billion, close to $3.3 billion, and in 2021 they had their I mean, the funding was at its peak, obviously due to the bubble and a lot of liquidity. And but still, the trajectory is on a positive direction, and it's expected to only improve going forward. So, I just since 50% of the Indian gaming market is dominated by real money gaming, let's just take a look at the biggest, real money gaming company in India, which is called Gamescraft. It's a very unique company because they have never. It's a bootstrap company. They have never taken any funding, and this Gamescraft is Rummy Culture's creator, and you can see that in FY22 they made their top line was close to 2,000 crores, and the profit after tax was close to 950 crores. So they have PAT margins of 45%. This is unheard of in the industry. I mean, in any sector, right? And obviously, there has been a lot of noise in the real money gaming industry recently due to the new GST rules. So they have recently clarified that the GST rules is going to be 18% on the buy-in and not on each bet. So the effect of this, we'll have to wait. It's yet to be seen. We'll have to wait and watch. But clearly, there is going to be some negative effect. But it's we have to wait and see what the quantum is. So apart from real money gaming, even local game development studios are seeing increased traction. So this started off in 2019 when India's oldest gaming studio, Dhruva Interactive, was acquired by a MNC that is Rockstar Games, who makes the GTA franchise for close to 55 crores. And in 2021, Play Simple was acquired for this was India's biggest gaming acquisition, and it was acquired for $360 million. So Play Simple makes a lot of casual games like Ludo, etc. There was another big M&A which happened in 2021. Moonfrog was acquired by Stillfront for around $90 million. So clearly, there's a lot of traction which is being seen in game development. There are also companies like Ubisoft and Rockstar Games which are hiring people, which are setting up bases in India. So there's because we have a lot of talent, right? So there is positive traction seen in India, and this is what the founder of Super Gaming had to say in an interview. So what has changed now is that the gaming industry is now seen as a career, and many people who are building games in India actually have global expertise. So and they've studied in a lot of the best universities abroad. So the future seems positive, and this was some of the recent headlines across the news. A lot of companies are planning to invest heavily into the gaming market. Krafton, which is the developer of PUBG, is planning to invest close to $150 billion, and other VCs as well are looking to invest in the Indian gaming market. So we've come to probably the close of our webinar. So just to before you go, if today's webinar piqued your interest, you can probably read this two volume book called The Ultimate History of Video Games by Stephen Kent to dive deeper into the history into the history of the industry. And it was a fascinating read when I was going through the book for this webinar. And before before we go to the Q&A, obviously this is we'll just talk about our fund. So this is Solitaire, which is the flagship fund of ithought, with close to 650 to 7 with an AUM between 650 and 700 crores, and it's going to be 4 years since we launched next week. And this is a bottom-up multi-cap fund, and we have clearly, the chart speaks for itself. We have done very well across time periods without taking any undue risk. So Mr. Shyam Shekhar, our founder, is the fund manager, along with Mr. G.R. Balaji, who's the head of research and the co-fund manager. We have a 12-member team with stellar credentials and diverse experiences. And while the markets have been pretty buoyant over the past 6 months, we have been able to identify select opportunities to deploy money, which is seen in the low cash holdings of the fund. So if you're interested, please get in touch with any of my team members. And if you have any questions, please type your questions in the chat box. I'll be happy to answer. So I think Mr. Pradeep has asked a question. So whether PMS products invest in Indian gaming stocks. So as of now, so the number of opportunities in the Indian markets is pretty limited. So as of now, we don't. So maybe in the future, we'll keep reevaluating and take a decision then. Yeah. So how it links to our business? I mean, we always have to, since this is a global industry, we always have to be updated with what's happening globally. And like I said, there are a lot of startups which are being funded right now, and these startups will come to the public markets in the next 3 to 5 years. So when it comes to the public markets, we need to be in a position to be able to evaluate them, and that is how it links to our business. Thank you, sir. Yeah, Mr. RSV is asking what is the risk for the gaming business in India? So, I mean, I'm not sure whether you're asking whether about real money gaming or general gaming. However, the biggest risk for obviously the industry is that it's a global industry. So you are competing with global giants, and the funding, the amount of money required to produce a hit game is going and to sustain a game is going to be a lot. So I would say that is the biggest risk: competition and funding. Yeah. So you are right that 99 almost all users are mobile users, and India's per capita GDP is low, and they don't have resources to pay for gaming. However, for game developers in India or game publishers, India is not just the only market. So there can be games from India which who sell globally, or which can be a hit globally. So I think that should be the aim for developers as of today. And obviously, the Indian gaming market itself will evolve as the economy grows. So it's a mix of both. So you have to be global in aspiration when you make games. Yeah, another good question by Mr. Pradeep. So he's asking whether online gaming, on cloud gaming benefits players, benefits telecom players. So cloud gaming has not yet. I mean, a lot of companies are focused on cloud gaming, but the traction in cloud gaming is not very high. So as of now, it's going to be a minuscule percentage of overall gaming. So there's no research as to how much that affects how much that affects ARPU, etc. But right now, it's not a big portion of the overall gaming, so it doesn't really affect the telecom players. But we'll have to wait and see how it evolves. Maybe 10 to 15 years down the line, every game will be streamed. So then it can affect, then it can be a positive impact on telecom players. Right now, the speeds and the latency is pretty low. I think if there are no further questions, we can probably call it a day. Thank you everybody for joining, and wish you a great day ahead.